Ancient man and his first civilizations. Indus Valley 3. Modern Pakistan, which was a part of India until 1947. When last we left the Indus Valley, Aryans from the Central Asian plains had invaded the valley and then expanded out into the rest of India. They had also melded their religious beliefs with local beliefs to form the Hindu religion. Later, the Aryans learned to write. However, some Brahmins considered it a sacrilege to change from communicating their beliefs orally to putting them in written form. But a sufficient number of Brahmins supported this innovation, and they began to put traditional Aryan stories into writing. These writings became known as the Vedas, Veda meaning wisdom. These Vedas became wisdom literature, a literature that would be considered as an infallible source of timeless, revealed truth. The most important of the Vedas was the Rig Veda, which consisted of hymns or devotional incantations written in 10 books. In the far northeast, Brahmins performed as teachers and gave instruction to local original inhabitant elites, who had not been completely Hinduized. These elites were accustomed to deference from local people, and they were offended by the posturing, pride and arrogance of the Brahmins. They resisted the claims of the Brahmins to higher rank and superior knowledge. Some among them opposed the bloodletting of Hinduism's animal sacrifices. Some of them also thought the Brahmins to be too involved in ceremonial formalities and ritual, and saw the Brahmins' view of gods and salvation as strange. With this dissent against orthodox Hinduism, a variety of men with vision appeared. They tried to fill the void left unfulfilled by Hinduism. These new sect leaders denied the authority of the Vedas, and each developed a code of conduct and a way of living and thinking that would hopefully lead to enlightenment and fulfillment. This movement was supported by original inhabitants of wealth and influence, who gave their support to one or another of these religious visionaries in their area. These new sect leaders wandered across the northeast, sometimes with large bands of followers. They entered communities to engage in disputations with rival sects and orthodox Brahmins. These disputations were welcomed entertainment for local people, unused to thought. This movement was supported by original inhabitants of wealth and influence, who gave their support to one or another of these religious visionaries in their area. These new sect leaders wandered across the northeast, sometimes with large bands of followers. They entered communities to engage in disputations with rival sects and orthodox Brahmins. These disputations were welcomed entertainment for local people, unused to thoughts and concepts from the outside world. The most successful of the new sects were those that attempted to provide relief from orthodox Hinduism's failure to alleviate human suffering. One such sect was the Jains, from the Sanskrit verb ji, meaning to conquer. The Jains sought relief from suffering by conquest over one's own passions and senses. This conquest, they believed, gave one purity of soul. According to legend, the Jains were led by Nataputta Vardhamana, the son of a royal governor from the Magadha region. Nataputta Vardhamana gave up his princely status for a life of asceticism, and he became known as Mahavira, Great-Souled One. Legend describes Mahavira's beginnings as a reformer, as not seeking to overthrow the Hindu caste system or the worship of Hindu gods, but wishing to do something about the misery that he saw all around him. Legend describes him as having sympathy, not only for people, but also for the animals that the Brahmins sacrificed. Jain laypersons took the following vows: never to intentionally destroy a living thing, never to speak falsehoods, never to steal, to always be faithful in marriage, to always be chaste outside of marriage, to possess no more money or other things than one had set for oneself as sufficient, a practical restriction that varied with how wealthy one was, to travel no farther than the limits that one had set for oneself, to think no evil thoughts about others, to sit in meditation as often as one had planned, to spend time as a temporary monk or nun, and to support the nuns and monks with contributions. Another, who led a religious movement to relieve suffering, was a prince named Siddhartha Gautama, later to be known as the Buddha, great teacher. Siddhartha was born into the Sakya tribe at the foot of the Himalayan mountains, just north of the Ganges Valley. Siddhartha lived in a small city named Kapilavastu, in what is now southern Nepal. He is reported to have seen his native city overrun and its people butchered by the Aryans. The Sakya tribe was under Aryan suzerainty, but had retained its independence in exchange for a tribute paid to Aryan overlords. The Sakya tribe had aristocrats and commoners, and according to legend, in his youth, Siddhartha had been sheltered from the ugliness and poverty all around him. But when he was 29, around 534 BC, he decided to become a wanderer. Apparently Siddhartha withdrew from a world that he saw as inhospitable to conquered royalty such as he. Though he was disturbed by the Aryans, he was also fascinated by the Aryan people who had destroyed his state and its traditions. The legend created by his followers describes Siddhartha as having become a wanderer. In order to learn about human existence, he became an ascetic and abused his body by hardly eating. After accepting failure in his quest to gain understanding of human existence, Siddhartha began eating better, and he began devising what he believed were better solutions to human misery. Siddhartha agreed with the view expressed in the Upanishads, that the cause of human misery was humanity itself. But he was determined not to fall into what he saw as the error of those who sought salvation in philosophical speculations. He refused to question or discuss whether the cosmos is finite or infinite, or whether there is life after death or other such metaphysical questions. He refused to consider these questions, on the grounds that these questions sidetrack people from doing something practical about the misery of their existence. According to legend, Siddhartha became a master of the tenets and practices of other sects, and that many of his disciples were recruited after hearing him debate with religious rivals in town gatherings. Siddhartha preached no warnings of torments for evil deeds. Instead, he preached the attaining of serenity or nirvana through self-discipline. Politically, India followed man's normal course of kingdoms rising and falling, with almost constant warfare. However, there was one kingdom of particular note. It is the kingdom founded by Mahatma Nanda. The Nandas are universally described as being of low origin, code for Sudras. They are of particular note because the northwestern part of India suffered a campaign by Alexander the Great in 327 BC. He was pursuing his campaign to conquer the extremities of the defeated Achaemenian Empire. Having entered Gandhara, he campaigned successfully across the Punjab as far as the Beas River. Here his troops refused to continue fighting, because they had encountered the army of the Nandas. Some historians suggest that Alexander's Greek soldiers may have mutinied out of fear of this army, the Kshatriya warrior class. In Hindu India, the second highest of the four varnas, or social classes, traditionally the military or ruling class. In ancient times, before the caste system was completely defined, they were considered first in rank, placed higher than the Brahmins, or priestly class. The legend that they were degraded by an incarnation of Vishnu as a punishment for their tyranny may reflect a historical struggle for supremacy between priests and rulers. In modern times, the Kshatriya Varna includes members from a variety of castes, united by their status in government or the military or their land ownership. The laws of war. When society became organized and a warrior caste, kshatriya, came into being, it was felt that the members of this caste should be governed by certain humane laws, the observance of which, it was believed, would take them to heaven, while their non-observance would lead them into hell. In the post-Vedic epoch, and especially before the epics were reduced to writing, lawless war had been supplanted, and a code had begun to govern the waging of wars. The ancient lawgivers, the reputed authors of the Dharma Sutras and the Dharma Sastras, codified the then existing customs and usages for the betterment of mankind. Thus the law books and the epics contained special sections on royal duties and the duties of common warriors. It is a general rule that kings were chosen from among the kshatriya caste. In other words, a non-kshatriya was not qualified to be a king. And this is probably due to the fact that the kshatriya caste was considered superior to others in virtue of its material prowess. Though the warrior's code enjoins that all the kshatriyas should die on the field of battle, still in practice many died a peaceful death. There is a definite ordinance of the ancient law books prohibiting the warrior caste from taking to asceticism. Action and renunciation is the watchword of the kshatriya. The warrior was not generally allowed to don the robes of an ascetic. But Mahavira and Gautama protested against these injunctions and inaugurated an order of monks or sannyasins. When these dissenting sects gathered in strength and numbers, the decline of kshatriya valor set in. Once they were initiated into a life of peace and prayer, they preferred it to the horrors of war. This was a disservice that dissenting sects did to the cause of ancient India. When a conqueror felt that he was in a position to invade the foreigner's country, he sent an ambassador with the message, "Fight or submit." More than 5,000 years ago, India recognized that the person of the ambassador was inviolable. This was a great service that ancient Hinduism rendered to the cause of international law. It was the religious force that invested the person of the herald or ambassador with an inviolable sanctity in the ancient world. The Mahabharata rules that the king who killed an envoy would sink into hell with all his ministers. Megasthenes was a Greek ethnographer in the Hellenistic period, author of the work Indica. He was born in Anatolia, modern Turkey, and became an ambassador of Seleucus I of Syria to the court of Chandrakottas, who possibly is Chandragupta Maurya in Pataliputra, India. However, the exact date of his embassy is uncertain. Scholars place it before 288 BC. Megasthenes noticed a peculiar trait of Indian warfare, whereas among other nations it is usual, in the contests of war, to ravage the soil and thus to reduce it to an uncultivated waste. Among the Indians, on the contrary, by whom husbandmen are regarded as a class that is sacred and inviolable. The tillers of the soil, even when battle is raging in their neighborhood, are undisturbed by any sense of danger, for the combatants on either side in waging the conflict make carnage of each other, but allow those engaged in husbandry to remain quite unmolested. Besides, they never ravage an enemy's land with fire, nor cut down its trees. The modern, scorched earth policy was then unknown. Professor H. Wilson says, the Hindu laws of war are very chivalrous and humane, and prohibit the slaying of the unarmed, of women, of the old, and of the conquered. At the very time when a battle was going on, he says, the neighboring cultivators might be seen quietly pursuing their work, perhaps plowing, gathering for crops, pruning the trees, or reaping the harvest. Chinese pilgrim to Nalanda University, Huiyuan Tixiang affirms that although there were enough of rivalries and wars in the 7th century AD, the country at large was little injured by them. Maurya Empire The Nanda dynasty was overthrown in 322 BC by Chandragupta Maurya B, who founded the Maurya Empire. and rapidly expanded his power westwards across central and western India, taking advantage of the disruptions of local powers in the wake of the withdrawal westward by Alexander the Great's Greek and Persian armies. By 320 BC, the empire had fully occupied northwestern India, defeating and conquering the satraps left by Alexander. It was the world's largest empire in its time. At its greatest extent, the empire stretched to the north along the natural boundaries of the Himalayas, and to the east stretching into what is now Assam. To the west, it reached beyond modern Pakistan, annexing Balochistan and much of what is now Afghanistan, including the modern Herat and Kandahar provinces. The empire was expanded into India's central and southern regions by the emperors Chandragupta and Bindusara, but it excluded a small portion of unexplored tribal and forested regions near Kalinga. Under Chandragupta, the Mauryan Empire conquered the Trans-Indus region, which was under Macedonian rule. Chandragupta then defeated the invasion led by Seleucus I, a Greek general from Alexander's army. Under Chandragupta and his successors, both internal and external trade, and agriculture and economic activities all thrived and expanded across India thanks to the creation of a single and efficient system of finance, administration and security. After the Kalinga War, the empire experienced half a century of peace and security under Ashoka. India was a prosperous and stable empire of great economic power whose trade extended across Western and Central Asia and Europe. Mauryan India also enjoyed an era of social harmony, religious transformation, and expansion of the sciences and of knowledge. Chandragupta Maurya's embrace of Jainism increased social and religious renewal and reform across his society, while Ashoka's embrace of Buddhism was the foundation of the reign of social and political peace and non-violence across all of India. Ashoka sponsored the spreading of Buddhist ideals into Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, West Asia and Mediterranean Europe. The Maurya Empire dissolved in 185 BC with the foundation of the Sungha dynasty in Magadha. The Gupta Empire map. The Gupta Empire existed from approximately from 320 to 550 AD and covered much of the Indian subcontinent. It was founded by Maharaja Sri Gupta. The dynasty was the model of a classical Indian civilization. The peace and prosperity created under leadership of Guptas enabled the pursuit of scientific and artistic endeavors. This period is called the Golden Age of India and was marked by extensive inventions and discoveries in science, technology, engineering, art, dialectic, literature, logic, mathematics, astronomy, religion and philosophy that crystallized the elements of what is generally known as Hindu culture. Chandragupta I, Samudragupta, and Chandragupta II were the most notable rulers of the Gupta dynasties. The high points of this cultural creativity are magnificent architecture, sculptures and paintings. The Gupta period produced scholars such as Kalidasa, Aryabhata, Varahamihira, Vishnu Sharma and Vatsyayana who made great advancements in many academic fields. Science and political administration reached new heights during the Gupta era. Strong trade ties also made the region an important cultural center and set the region up as a base that would influence nearby kingdoms and regions in Burma, Sri Lanka, Malay Archipelago and Indochina. The earliest available Puranas are also thought to have been written around this period. The empire gradually declined because of many factors like the substantial loss of territory and imperial authority caused by their own erstwhile feudatories and the invasion by the Hunas, White Huns, Turks, from Central Asia. After the collapse of the Gupta Empire in the 6th century, India was again ruled by numerous regional kingdoms. A minor line of the Gupta clan continued to rule Magadha after the disintegration of the empire. These Guptas were ultimately ousted by the Vardhana ruler Harsha, who established an empire in the first half of the 7th century. Mughal Empire was an imperial power in the Indian subcontinent from about 1526 to 1757. The Mughal emperors were Muslims and direct descendants of the Mongol Genghis Khan through Chagatai Khan and Timur. At the height of their power in the late 17th and early 18th centuries, they controlled most of the subcontinent, extending from Bengal in the east to Balochistan in the west, Kashmir in the north to the Kaveri Basin in the south. Its population at that time has been estimated as between 110 and 150 million, over a territory of more than 3.2 million square kilometers, 1.2 million square miles. The classic period of the empire started in 1556 with the accession of Akbar the Great. Under his rule, India enjoyed much cultural and economic progress as well as religious harmony. Akbar was a successful warrior. He also forged martial alliances with several Hindu Rajput kingdoms. Some Rajput kingdoms continued to pose a significant threat to Mughal dominance of northwestern India, but they were subdued by Akbar. The reign of Shah Jahan, the 5th emperor, was the golden age of Mughal architecture and the arts. He erected many splendid monuments, the most famous of which is the legendary Taj Mahal at Agra, as well as the Pearl Mosque, the Red Fort, the Jama Masjid of Delhi, and the Lahore Fort. Mongols were of course not an artistic people, so works of art and building were of course done by local architects and artisans. The Mughal Empire reached the zenith of its territorial expansion during the reign of Aurangzeb. During his lifetime, victories in the south expanded the Mughal Empire to more than 1.25 million square miles, ruling over more than 150 million subjects, nearly 1/4 of the world's population. By the mid-18th century, the Marathas, an Indian warrior caste, had ravaged the Mughal provinces from the Deccan to Bengal. An internal dissatisfaction, as well as separatist agendas from the Rajputs, Sikhs, and Jats, arose due to the weakness of the Mughal Empire's administrative and economic systems. In 1739, a weakened Mughal Empire was defeated in the Battle of Karnal by the forces of Nadir Shah, making Mughal power severely limited. The last emperor, Bahadur Shah II, had authority over only the city of Shahjahanabad. He supported the Indian Rebellion of 1857 and was overthrown by the British, and the last remnants of the empire were taken over by the British Raj. Deep was the British rule in the Indian subcontinent between 1858 and 1947. The term can also refer to the period of dominion. The region under British control included areas directly administered by the United Kingdom, as well as the princely states ruled by individual rulers under the paramountcy of the British Crown. The system of governance was instituted in 1858, when the rule of the British East India Company was transferred to the Crown in the person of Queen Victoria, and who, in 1876, was proclaimed Empress of India, and lasted until 1947, when the British Indian Empire was partitioned into two sovereign dominion states: the Union of India, later the Republic of India, and the Dominion of Pakistan, later the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, the eastern half of which, still later, became the People's Republic of Bangladesh. At the inception of the Raj in 1858, Lower Burma was already a part of British India, Upper Burma was added in 1886, and the resulting Union, Burma, was administered as a province until 1937, when it became a separate British colony, gaining its own independence in 1948. The Travels of Marco Polo. This manuscript from about 1350 is one of the oldest extant copies of Les Voyages de Marco Polo, The Travels of Marco Polo. The account by the Venetian merchant Marco Polo, circa 1254–1324, of his adventures in Central Asia and the Far East during the latter part of the 13th century. It is possibly one of 5 manuscripts relating to Marco Polo's journey that belonged to King Charles V of France, reigned 1364–80. Later it was part of the library of the French book collector Alexandre Petal. It was sold to Queen Christina of Sweden, 1626–89, in 1650. Accompanied by his father Niccolo and his uncle Maffeo, Marco Polo traveled overland to China in 1271–75. He then spent 17 years serving Kublai Khan, 1215–94, grandson of Genghis Khan and conqueror of China, for whom he undertook assignments in China as well as in South and Southeast Asia. The 3 Venetians returned to their native city by sea in 1292–95. Marco Polo soon was caught up in the war between Venice and Genoa, for which he equipped and commanded a galley in the Venetian navy. He was taken prisoner by the Genoese in 1296. According to tradition, while in prison he dictated the stories of his travels to a cellmate, Rustichello da Pisa, who wrote them down in Old French. Marco Polo's account was not just a simple record of the journey, but a description of the world, a mixture of a travel report, legend, hearsay, and practical information. For these reasons, Les Voyages de Marco Polo is sometimes called Divisement du Monde, Description of the World, or Livre des Merveilles du Monde, Book of the Marvels of the World. The work was an important introduction for Europeans to the history and geography of Central Asia and China. At the end of the Stockholm manuscript is a Mappa Mundi, a medieval schematic zonal map of the world, which, however, may be a later addition. Any of the albinos' main reasons to pursue dominance over all of the world's other peoples, in spite of their meager numbers, was their desire for their defect, albinism, to be seen as something positive, not the defect and impediment that it actually was. To this end, once they had secured control over societies and means of communication, they set about turning everything around in their teachings to the world's, now subject, non-albino populations. As we have seen, and shall see more of, what was up, became down, what was left, became right, and what was once black, as historical people, and otherwise, became white. One might wonder how a tiny little country like Britain could have ruled a huge country like original India, with its 1.5 billion people, from thousands of miles away. Logic and common sense tells us that India should have squashed Britain like a cockroach. It is only by looking at India after independence that we see why India couldn't squash Britain. Immediately after independence, a huge chunk of India broke away and became Muslim Pakistan. Later another huge chunk broke away and became Muslim Bangladesh. What's left of original India is racked by religious bombings by Muslims and Hindus. Clearly religious and ethnic divisions are what made India weak, and what the albinos used to exploit those populations. But let us not overlook the part played by India's albino population, remnants of the Aryan invasion. India's mulattoes are the majority of the population, and like everywhere else, India's mulattoes are often race confused. Compare the India of Marco Polo's time, when Indians revered their black skin, to the India of today, where European and American albino cosmetics companies and India's albinos were able to brainwash the weak-minded of India's mulattoes. European and American albino cosmetics companies, and India's albinos, teach her that in order to be beautiful and acceptable, she must lighten her skin. Clearly one objective of world domination by the albinos was the opportunity to change the perception of albinism, from that of a defect to that of an attribute to be sought after. Their success is akin to Stockholm Syndrome. But as in Stockholm Syndrome, the victim's perception is wrong. Albinism is still a defect. The Mughal Empire, the great-grandson of Tamerlane, full or mulatto Mongol ruler of Persia, and wholesale murder of Persia's original blacks, Babar, who on his mother's side was descended from the famous Genghis Khan, came to India in 1526 at the request of an Indian governor who sought Babar's help in his fight against Ibrahim Lodi, the last head of the Delhi Sultanate. Babar defeated Lodi at Panipat, not far from Delhi, and so came to establish the Mughal Empire in India. Mysore. The old Hindu state of Mysore had passed into the hands of a Muslim military adventurer, Hyder Ali Khan, in 1762. Hyder died in 1782, and his son Tipu took over the kingdom. The exact date of Hyder Ali's birth is not known with certainty. Various historical sources provide dates ranging between 1717 and 1722 for his birth. There are also some variations in reports of his ancestry. According to some accounts, his grandfather was descended from a line of Muslims tracing their lineage back to Persia, while another traces his lineage instead to the area of present-day Afghanistan. In a third account, written by one of his French military officers, Hyder himself claimed descent from the Quraysh tribe of Arabs, the tribe of the Prophet Muhammad. His father, Fath Muhammad, was born in Kola, and served as a commander of 50 men in the bamboo rocket artillery, mainly used for signaling, in the army of the Nawab of Carnatic. Wiki. Tipu Sultan, 1750 to 1799. Also known as the Tiger of Mysore and Tipu Sahib, was a ruler of the Kingdom of Mysore and a scholar, soldier, and poet. Tipu was the eldest son of Sultan Hyder Ali of Mysore and his wife, Fatima Fakut Nissa. Tipu introduced a number of administrative innovations during his rule, including his coinage, a new Mauludi lunar-solar calendar, and a new land revenue system which initiated the growth of Mysore's silk industry. Tipu expanded the iron-cased Mysorean rockets and wrote the military manual Fathul Mujahideen, considered a pioneer in the use of rocket artillery. He deployed the rockets against advances of British forces and their allies in their 1792 and 1799 siege of Srirangapatna. Napoleon, while still not Emperor of the French, sought an alliance with Tipu. In alliance with the French in their struggle with the British, and in Mysore's struggles with other surrounding powers. Both Tipu and his father used their French-trained army against the Marathas, Sira, and rulers of Malabar, Kodagu, Bednor, Carnatic, and Travancore. Upon his father's death in 1782, Tipu succeeded to a large kingdom bordered by the Krishna River in the north, the Eastern Ghats in the east, and the Arabian Sea in the west. He won important victories against the British in the Second Anglo-Mysore War, and negotiated the 1784 Treaty of Mangalore with him after his father Hyder Ali suddenly died from cancer in December 1782 during the Second Anglo-Mysore War. Tipu engaged in expansionist attacks against his neighbors. He remained an implacable enemy of the British East India Company, bringing him into renewed conflict with his attack on British allied Travancore in 1789. In the Third Anglo-Mysore War, Tipu was forced into a humiliating treaty, losing a number of previously conquered territories, including Malabar and Mangalore. He sent embassies to foreign states, including the Ottoman Turkey, Afghanistan, and France, in an attempt to rally opposition to the British. In the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War, the combined forces of the British East India Company and the Nizam of Hyderabad defeated Tipu, and he was killed on the 4th of May 1799 while defending his fort of Srirangapatna. Tipu's ambitions apparently greatly exceeded those of his father, and he strove actively to escape the all-pervasive shadow of Mughal suzerainty. However, as in the Sikh kingdom of Ranjit Singh, the problem with the Mysore of Haidar and Tipu was their inability to build an internal consensus. Their dependence on migrants and mercenaries, for both military and fiscal expertise, was considerable, and they were always resisted by local chiefs, the so-called polygars. More crucial was the fact that by the 1770s Mysore faced a formidable military adversary in the form of the English East India Company, which did not allow it any breathing room. It was the English who denied Mysore access to the relatively rich agricultural lands and ports of the Coromandel coastal plain in eastern India, and, equally as significant, it was at the hands of an English attacking force that Tipu finally was killed in 1799. Summary: as we have shown, Europeans are the albinos of India's Dravidians. The white albino race started out as Dravidian albinos seeking refuge in Central Asia. Upon their return, invasion of India, the albinos, Aryans, pushed deep into India, but could not penetrate into southern India. Over the course of the next 3,500 years, Dravidians and albinos, Aryans crossbred, developing skin color regions in India. In the north we have mainly white and light-skinned people, in the south we have mainly black people, and scattered through the region we have the majority brown-skinned mulattoes of the two. The 2013 genetic study, the light-skin allele of SLC24A5 in South Asians and Europeans shares identity by descent, proves that Europeans and Indians are the same people. It also shows that the mixing of albinos and blacks, which typifies India, is also responsible for the populations in the Middle East and elsewhere, where it involved the native blacks, Berbers, Libyans, Egyptians, Hebrews, Phoenicians, Anatolians, Arabs, and the Turk albinos, invaders.
MIKHAEL